Hey, this is Sean Pickett. I'm the founder and CEO of Sales Integrity, a B2B tech sales coach, and your host for the Sales Integrity Podcast. I'm ready to make it another great podcast today. And with that, let's get today's episode rocking and rolling. All right, welcome back to the Sales Integrity Podcast. I'm really excited to interview today's guest, Fred Diamond. Fred, are you ready to share some wisdom with Sales Integrity Nation today?
I am thrilled to be with you, Sean.
Awesome. Great. Well, let me do a brief intro of Fred, and then we're going to have Fred elaborate a little bit on that. Fred is the executive director and co-founder of the Institute for Excellence in Sales, also known as the IES for short. The IES was co-founded as being led by Fred to recognize corporate and organizational sales in business development, operational excellence, and promote best practices and thought leadership. With the growth of the IES, Fred has also been causing waves in the sales world as well, which we'll get to in a little bit when I interview Fred. Well known as a marketing consultant to companies such as Microsoft, Oracle, and others, Fred has led the IES to become a leading source of sales excellence, content development, and premier sales training solutions. Fred himself is an exceptional speaker, which you'll find out as we start talking on the podcast here, who frequently helps companies improve their sales processes and stay ahead of trends. Fred, I'm really excited to interview you today. And of course, that was a wonderful intro. I really did some research here into who you are, your background. We've, of course, had a chance to talk. Previously, we were introduced by a mutual contact, and I thought to myself, I got to get Fred on the podcast. So I'm really grateful you decided to join us here today, but nobody can introduce themselves, and I mean nobody, better than themselves, right? So I'd love for you to expand upon what I just did for an intro, talk a little bit about the Institute for Excellence in Sales. I think our audience who are primarily made up of sales leaders and sales professionals in the B2B space would find great benefit in the IES. So I'd love for you to just expand upon the intro, talk a little bit about your background and what led you to co-found the Institute of Excellence in Sales, and tell us all about the IES.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it. The Institute for Excellence in Sales. I am based in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., the sixth largest MSA in the country, as I like to tell people. I started the Institute for Excellence in Sales about 5 years ago. I had been a marketing consultant, product marketing, outsourced chief marketing officer for companies such as Microsoft and some other companies. I had about 115 different clients, and I began to realize that even though I was being hired as a marketing consultant, most of the companies that I was being hired to work with were hiring us because they had sales or revenue problems. And marketing was not effectively helping them grow the business or achieve what the business owners wanted to do. I do need to say a couple personal things. I'm a Philly person. I'm from Philadelphia originally, went to college in Atlanta. So I think in terms of Philadelphia. So FYI, I know you're a baseball fan as well. We had some great chats about that. Yeah. I have 3 kids, and I have a wonderful significant other as well. But based here in Northern Virginia, right outside of D.C., but back to the IES, began to realize that, again, companies were hiring us because they were having revenue problems. So I wanted to create, to be frank with you, originally, it was a lead source for my consulting business. Mm-hmm. How can I be in front of as many companies with sales problems as possible? So we created the IES about 5 years ago. We have an award event every year that gets a couple hundred people. And we began to bring world-class sales thought leaders, authors, and speakers, such as Neil Rackham, Konrath, Jeb Blount, Anthony Iarino, to the DC region to do workshops. The program just took off from there. People started asking us for more things, for women in sales program, for young professionals in sales programs, for recommendations on sales speakers, for recommendations on sales training. So we became a resource for the sales professional, typically B2B, enterprise, or complex sales.
Mm-hmm. So if someone's in B2B sales, they're a sales leader, they have a sales team, and they're not located in the DC metro area where you're located, can they still work with you? And if so, how do they do that?
Absolutely. So we videotape all of our speakers from day one. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people contact us out of the region for one of 3 things. We have a very robust mentor program. So we have a lot of our senior members who will mentor junior members, and vice versa. A lot of the more senior people want to stay fresh with topics such as social selling, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Yep. Networking skills, how to use some of the various social avenues to continue to get the message out there as well. So a lot of people from outside of the region become members of the IES to get a mentor. We get a lot of companies who reach out to us for sales training and sales speaker referrals and recommendations. Mm-hmm. So we have a very robust sales speaker bureau, and I probably get 3 to 4 inquiries per week, or the IES does, for companies outside of the region asking us who should we use for sales training. And we've actually researched dozens, hundreds of sales training companies to understand truly what they excel at, which industries they are fantastic in, and who would be the best source to recommend to people.
So over the last 5 years, you've had a chance, you mentioned some really good names, people that I really respect in the sales training, sales coaching, sales consulting world, which is awesome. So you've established these great relationships with sales thought leaders, I'll call them. But at the same time, you've really kind of aggregated and built up this nice list of, here's a who's who of training, and you can match up. If you're an organization in B2B mainly, and you have a sales team and you're looking for a specific type of training, whether social selling, cold calling, strategic networking, on down the line, closing, negotiating, you've built up this nice catalog of resources, if you will. You can shorten the time frame for these sales leaders trying to figure that out, who's the best that we should go through. So from a sales leader perspective, they'd want to know about the IES because of that alone. Is that correct?
That is true. As a matter of fact, what happened was, it was about 3.5 years ago. I tend to remember it being on one day, but it was probably over a week or two. I got 5 inquiries from companies who had heard about the IES, either from a blog or Google or something like that, and basically came to me and said, here's my situation. I have 50 sales professionals. The top of the funnel is not getting filled the way it used to, or deals aren't flowing through. And someone contacted us and said that their referral network has totally dried up. So they said, can you help us figure out who would be the best resource to use? And I was wondering, how come you don't know who to call? I mean, there's no shortage of sales trainers. That's just your company and dozens others. And they just didn't know. It's a purchase that you make maybe once a decade. Maybe you were just promoted to a sales leadership position and you just don't know the resources. Maybe you hired a guy 5 years ago and he's no longer in town. So what we did is we went out, we researched all of the leading sales training companies. We hired a team of researchers, and we started building a database of the sales training providers out there, what they're good at, what they're not good at, what industries they serve. And companies are coming to us looking for this information. And we then act either as a conduit, or we act some cases as the prime contractor and take over the sales training for them. We don't do any sales training here specifically, but we bring the best partners, the right provider, to sales VPs to achieve what they need to achieve.
That's great. So that's from the sales leader and the company leadership perspective. So how about for the sales professional? I read quite a bit. I'm a voracious reader. I read even LinkedIn articles from thought leaders like yourself. So obviously in prep of our interview, I did some research into your points of view and what you had written. We're going to get to one specific article that I think is really great here in just a few minutes. But there's another one that I just thought of as you were talking that you wrote about the importance. I think it's something about the importance of seeking a mentor or having a mentor. You're very big on that mentorship. You mentioned that briefly as you're talking about sales professionals reaching out to you. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of having a mentor and how do you facilitate and broker that relationship between sales trainers or mentors and those sales professionals that are seeking mentorship?
That's a great question. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm one of those people, I'll ask anybody. I'll be on a bus. I'll ask everybody on the bus for advice. And I really respect leadership and I really respect expertise. So that's part of the premises of having created the IES. But a couple of things happened. I'll tell you one specific example. We had a member who is senior in his career and has done very, very well. And he has a very large house. He's done exceptionally well for brand name companies. Came to one of our programs about 4 years ago. And he grabbed me by the arm. He's one of those kind of guys who grabs you by the arm. And he called me Freddie, which very few people call me Freddie. And he said, Freddie, he said, should I be tweeting? And I was like, okay, let's talk about it. And he said, I have this problem. He said, my customer died last year. It's a guy who's was in his 70s at the time. He said, my customer died last year. The new guy doesn't return my phone calls. I'm still vital. I still want to be selling. What should I be doing these days? So this is a guy in his 70s who's done very, very well. So we matched him up with a couple other people in the organization, and they formed a mastermind group, and they just started talking about what's working now and how do you need to make yourself fresh. So we said, you know what, let's formalize this program. So one of our leaders, a guy named Philip Martin, pulled together the program. We created criteria for the mentors and criteria for the proteges. So we made a good match. Some people wanted to be matched up male to male, female to female. Some people wanted to be matched up in industry. And we basically said you have up to 6 opportunities to interact with each other for 30 minutes at a time. And then you'll graduate, then you can start the program again for the year. So it's a member benefit of the IES. We put some guidelines in place. But basically, it's been tremendous just to get one bit of advice. And that's the one thing I've learned with the IES. I've learned a ton, but a thing I've learned is if you can take one thing away from a conversation with an expert, from attending a session, and not just take away, but execute and implement immediately, your life will dramatically increase.
Yeah.
As will your professional ability.
Yeah. And so really, when you're talking mentorship, this is at the one-on-one level, a mentee and a mentor. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So very akin to coaching, and we do a lot of sales coaching at Sales Integrity. So not only do we go in and do workshops and one-time events like that, but the real value we've seen is exactly what you're talking about. The secret sauce there into really having them retain what they learn and apply it more importantly. And what I refer to as the real world of selling is that one-on-one coaching. And the reason we found, I'd be interested in your perspective on this, is that in a group setting, although valuable, and there are lots of studies out there, Society for Training and Development, Sales Executive Council, on down the line that show that we retain 87 or we lose 87% of what we were trained on just 30 days later. So we retain 13%, which I'm the optimist. I like to look at that side of it, right? Mm-hmm. But if you couple that same training program or with a follow-on reinforcing coaching program, your return on investment goes up fourfold from 22% up to 88%, right? And so really that secret sauce is that one-on-one coaching that allows you to translate those ideas into the real world of selling. So going back to what you said, I like to think of that 13% as that one thing that really resonated with me in a training session that I went and applied, and I lost the rest of it. But when you have a mentor, a one-on-one coach, you're more apt to kind of look around and say, okay, no one else is listening. All right, coach, here's what I'm really struggling with, right? And things you're not going to admit in front of your peers. Hey, I'm terrible at cold calling. I'm terrified of asking for referrals or whatever it may be, not good at networking events. They'll bring that up in a private one-on-one, customized coaching or mentorship session. Have you found that to be the same with your mentor program that you have?
Absolutely. There's, even though you may respect your boss, let's say you're a 27, 30-year-old sales professional in your second job, mm-hmm. and all of a sudden, your quota's increased, the expectations of you have increased. There's only so many things that you want to disclose to your boss. Mm-hmm. You don't really want to tell your boss you're struggling. You always want to maintain a degree of strength. So what we found is the program gives you an opportunity to let the guard down a little bit, show some vulnerability. But the other thing too, Sean, is you have to want to get the coaching. Mm-hmm. You have to want it in order to execute change and to make a change in your habits and your system. There's something that we started doing. Every month we bring these world-class sales thought leaders to the DC region to do workshops every single month. We don't take off for July or August. And in the DC region, we get about 150 to 200 people every month who attend. We started implementing something about 6 months ago, actually about a year ago. It's called the 3 things. We give people a flyer every program. We ask them over the course of today's program, write down 3 things that you are going to do today, not notes. You take your notes, but write down 3 things that you will do today. And it's not get better at sales, or it's, it's not lose weight. Yeah. If it's lose weight, it would be go home and empty out all the cookies from the pantry. In sales, it would be something like call my hardest prospect before noon. Yeah. Or stand in front of a mirror for an hour working on my value proposition. And we then, at the end of the program, we go around in groups of 5 to 6, and we have everybody list one of the 3 things that they are going to do today in front of an audience of 5 to 6 people, so that there's a degree of accountability and commitment.
Yeah, I like how specific you make it, right? If you think in generalities, you'll generally get nothing, right? You're not going to make the progress. But if you're very specific and purpose-driven in what you do, then you're going to see through to results. So that's great to hear that you do that. I take notes myself, and I wrote that down, the 3 things. So always learning from everyone, right? Which is awesome. Well, let me ask you a question, Fred, that I ask all of my guests. Obviously, I name my company Sales Integrity. Name of this podcast is Sales Integrity, so that has a meaning to me. But what I found is that all of my guests provide a very unique perspective on what it means for a sales professional to demonstrate integrity while selling. So how does Fred Diamond define sales integrity, and what does that mean to you?
That's a great question. So again, every month we're bringing these world-class sales speakers, sales trainers, sales consultants to present, and we do many other programs as well. And I began to notice a trend. And I began to notice by having the Neil Rackhams, the Tim Sullivans, the Tom Snyders every month, that they all wanted to raise the profession. They all wanted to raise the professionalism of the people who are calling themselves B2B or enterprise or complex sales professionals. And what that means is treating sales as a profession. Mm-hmm. Getting up and learning, studying, executing, masterminding with other great sales professionals, not winging it, not kind of like Googling your prospect 2 minutes before you walk in, mm-hmm. but understanding a couple of days before or whatever, truly preparing. So we like to call it the art and science of professional selling. And it's not charisma, it's not a hearty handshake. It's about understanding the problems that your prospects and customers are facing and how you can provide that. And I've seen that over the years. If people truly accept the fact that it's a profession and we celebrate the profession, mm-hmm. then by definition, you will develop integrity. You'll be more sincere about helping your customers achieve what they need to achieve. That's when your career takes off.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's great. It's always interesting to hear the different perspective. I love that, and celebrating the profession, having integrity because you treat it as a profession, not as just a job. And we've always seen those traits be, exhibited within the top, what we refer to as sales achievers, those that are consistently achieving their sales and income goals. They treat it really as a profession. I go a step further, and I did a whole podcast on the entrepreneur mindset, that the top sales achievers really looked at themselves as an entrepreneur running their own business. So their own territory, their own book of business was their own business. They just happened to be funded by their company, their employer, and that was their VC, the way they looked at it. But they really treated everything they did, their customers, their prospects, their partners, everything they did as if it was their own business. So I call that funded entrepreneur mindset of the top sales achievers, and that's very relevant for what you were just talking about, which is having integrity because you look at it as a profession, you celebrate the profession, right?
I think you and I have a lot more in common than I realized, because I used to tell sales professionals whenever they would ask me for coaching, I would say, treat yourself as if you're the VP of sales for Joe Smith Enterprises, mm-hmm. your name. You are the VP of sales, and at this moment in time, you happen to be funded, I like the way you said that, by ABC Corporation. But, treat yourself as if it's your business. This mm-hmm. is your business. If it's your business, you have a different level of commitment, which we'll talk about in a little bit, different level of integrity. If you think about like a doctor, or other organization that gets certified, they're just not going to wing it, walking mm-hmm. into brain surgery. They will have studied it. They will have, obviously they've gone to medical school, but, they constantly attend seminars and conferences and observe, other types of things. And we tell sales reps, man, talk to the good ones out there. Mm-hmm. Whenever I see young professionals, I say, go find someone who's great and just take them to lunch.
Yep.
Understand your business intimately, understand the profession, understand the history, mm-hmm. Read, like you said, LinkedIn articles, not just to say, hey, I read that article, but to see how it fits into your repertoire as you develop your career.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what's great about organizations like yours, the Institute for Excellence in Sales. It provides an environment for them to seek out a mentor, to surround themselves with a mastermind of other individuals that are like-minded, that treat their their sales territory and their book of business as if it's their own company, right? The best part about that type of entrepreneur is your risk is removed because you're being funded by your company. So you have to worry about all the other things like you did when you're starting up the IES, right? And funding it and getting it built and all that good stuff. It's interesting. You talk about, some people are reluctant to reach out maybe and invest in joining an institute or hiring a coach and all that. You still can seek out a mentor exactly as Fred just laid it out for our audience. When I was young, Sean, and I first started in the IT industry, the tech industry, back in the 90s, and I was in Chicago, first thing I did is went and looked at the stack rankings of all the sales reps, right? I was a newbie. I was right out of college, and I looked at it, and I found the number one rep, and then I went to his office, and I said, how would you like to be a part of the Breakfast of Champions? Like, the Breakfast of Champions? What are you talking about? I said, it's the best of the best salespeople. They meet every Thursday morning for a breakfast. They get together, they collaborate, they share, and exchange information and ideas of what works well. How would you like to be a part of it? He goes, I would love to be a part of that. He's like, who's all the members of that? I said, you and me. And it was my creative, unique way of asking him for mentorship, which I did after that. I said, I really am seeking out your mentorship. I'd love to learn what you did to become the best so I can emulate that and ascend up myself. And he was very happy to take me under his wing and be a mentor. So that was a great relationship I had. But you could even do that. That didn't cost me anything, except I did pay for his breakfast every Thursday morning, which was well worth it. Right?
I mean, that is a great idea. And here's the other secret that a lot of people don't realize is most people at that level will be dying to talk about themselves.
Absolutely.
And what they've learned and what they've achieved. Because you know what? I used to tell people this all the time in marketing. When you go home, your spouse doesn't really care what you did today. They didn't care about the sales call you had today. They care about, your health and happiness, hopefully. But, they don't know the intricacy of what got you finally that meeting, with CNN or whoever it is that you're selling to.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are some guys who might not want to share. They think you're competition. But, in this whole world now of mindfulness and, of helping and everything like that, be bold. And those people, they don't get asked out all the time for advice, and they would love to give it to you, especially ones who are successful.
Yeah.
And if they see that you're interested in also being successful, I guarantee you they'll give you time. And you want to be respectful, not going to ask for Sunday night, but Thursday morning at 6. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. So another great idea that you had written about in terms of getting ideas, and it doesn't cost you too much. Obviously, if you invest in yourself, you can invest at smaller levels that go a long way, such as buying books, right? And you had written an article recently on February 2nd of this year, 2017, on LinkedIn, and you had talked about, and the title of this thing really caught my attention, but the elusive critical factor for sales success. And so I thought that was great. I went and actually posted that out on LinkedIn this morning and tagged you, as I had mentioned, so kind of build up some anticipation for this podcast interview going live on Wednesday this week. But I thought this was something that we absolutely had to talk about. So what is the elusive critical factor for sales success? I'm sure our audience is dying to hear this. Right.
So I learned about 25 years ago that you will be successful if you understand what you're committed to. So, and I'm going to take it a step further with the key word that I learned. So the first thing I learned 25 some odd years ago from one of my mentors was, what are you committed to? Okay, I'm committed to growing the Institute. I'm committed to being a great dad. I'm committed to getting to be a better bowler or whatever it might be. Okay, what are you doing to achieve and pursue those commitments? Are you reading? Are you making calls? Are you talking to people? Are you getting better at your trade? And I kept thinking that was it. It was commitment. Mm-hmm. And one day, a sales coach in Atlanta named Randy Riersma, he and I met. He came into town. Do you know Randy, by the way?
I don't know Randy, but I do now after reading your article.
So he was introduced to us by one of our corporate members, and we had a cup of coffee at a Panera Bread in Vienna, Virginia, right outside D.C. And we had a great chat. Usual high energy, two people talking about sales achievement. About 2 months later, actually 2 weeks later, I get a envelope from him, and it had a book. The book was called The Ultimate Secret to Getting Absolutely Everything You Want by Mike Carnacki. And I put it on my desk, and it sat on my desk for 2 months. One Saturday night, I couldn't get to sleep. Went downstairs, and I picked up this book. Here it is. It's one of those thin type books like the 1 Minute Manager type. I just started reading this book. 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. And I'm reading it, and I'm like really getting entranced by this book. And it was written in the early 80s. Finally, he gets to the secret. And the secret is, what are you willing to do? Not just what are you committed, but what are you truly willing? And back to the example of losing weight. If you're truly not just committed, if you're committed to losing weight, are you willing to drive past Dunkin' Donuts? You know what I'm saying? Well, you know, I'll have a donut, but I'll go work it off. Okay, you're full of crap. You're not willing to do what's necessary. Yeah. If I am willing to get 15 new corporate accounts for the IES, am I willing to have 5 lunches per week? Am I willing to get on the phone and make 30 phone calls? Am I willing to hire someone to prospect for me? Mm-hmm. You know, the commitment's great, you know, energy, all that, but you got to look at yourself and what am I truly willing? And again, you know, if I'm willing to, I use the lose weight thing, am I willing to drive past Dunkin' Donuts? If I'm willing to become a great sales professional, am I willing to make 30 phone calls a day?
Yep.
You know, am I willing to ask for the deal?
That is great because commitment is talked about a lot. Right. And a lot of people would like to think of themselves as someone who commits, especially to success in their own personal success. And I think that, you know, you can agree with that. Hey, I think this person is committed to succeeding, but they're not taking the action just yet. Why is that? Because they're not willing to get started towards that commitment. Right. And so that's interesting. So I'm looking at your article here and it says, you know, the willingness comes before commitment is what you wrote. So if you're committed, you know, look at what you're willing to do that correlates with that commitment, and that'll tell you whether you're really going to make progress towards that commitment or not, right?
And you know what? And the willing is the hard stuff. I mean, it's easy to get to the point of what am I committed to? I'm committed to being a great father. Okay, well, are you going to be at home? Are you willing to be home every night for dinner? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, if you're committed to losing weight, are you willing to drive past Dunkin' Donuts and give up donuts? Donuts are delicious, you know, but you're not going to lose weight if you eat a donut every day. That's so you might be committed, but you're truly not willing. And back to sales. If you were back to the integrity conversation we had before about the professionalism, if you're truly committed to being a top-rate sales professional, are you willing to read a book a week? Are you willing to have a mentor? Mm-hmm. Are you willing to go after the toughest prospect in town? You know, or are you willing to kind of wait for leads to come? Mm-hmm. You know, and you know, as compared to back to the VP example used before, which is perfect. Are you willing to truly be a VP of your own business? Yeah, being funded by a company these days.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful thought. And actually, I'm going to write a blog on that topic because I thought of it for years. And I'm going to refer to you.
Oh, good. I look forward to reading that. So that is awesome. I mean, this is what this really is it's about, you know, we're thinking deeply about a concept, right?
Yes.
And I read, you know, one thing that I could recommend to the audience is every morning commit to a personal hour. You know, I call it a personal development power hour, right? And if you've ever read the book Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, he kind of provides a kind of a template for that and a framework on how to do that. But you could, if you start every morning feeding your brain and really thinking, right, creatively and critically and kind of get your mindset, then I think you'd be willing to do a lot more because then you can start envisioning where you're going to be after you achieve what you're committing to achieve, but you got to be willing to do it. And that's a good place to start, you know, getting in motion, whether it's going for a walk or, you know, physically improving your health and all that stuff. Those two things are kind of correlated, that mind body, you know, connection. I know a lot of people when they get in ruts and sales ruts and slumps and all that stuff, it's because they're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So change that up. Well, change your thinking, change your motion, then eventually you'll change / improve your results, right? So that's great. Well, let's shift gears a little bit, Fred, and talk social selling, as that seems to be a really hot topic these days. I'm sure you've had plenty of sales trainers that have come in and maybe focused on that niche that are really good at the use of social technology such as LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and others. That's really taken the selling scene by storm, and I'm sure you've noticed that. So given that, I'd love to get your viewpoint on social selling. You know, what is it? What does it mean to you? And maybe one, you know, social selling tip or technique you could recommend for our audience, keeping in mind there are B2B sellers out there that sell typically complex technical product, services, solutions. So let's talk social selling here for a little bit.
Yeah. So as you know, there's a war going on between the, there was actually an article written, I think it was 2004 by Philip Kotler and Neil Rackham. It was called Ending the War Between Sales and Marketing. Mm-hmm. So, one of the goals was it was published in the Harvard Business Review. One of the goals, of course, was to get deeply integrated with marketing and sales, and a lot's happened. I think one of the biggest blessings and curses for sales professionals is the proliferation of marketing automation, because you probably get this as well. We get tons of automatically generated emails when you click on someone's website, or even when you just visit someone's site. You don't even need nowadays to fill in a contact form or anything. And automatically an email will get generated by Marketo or whatever, and it'll show up on the desk of one of your junior sales development reps. And they'll think that just because you went to their site that you're a prospect. So you get the automated email, then you'll get the phone call, and then they'll think, okay, because I got this guy on the phone, he's a 50% prospect. And it's served so many sales professionals poorly, because it's truly about, there's a process. People will buy when they are ready to buy, if there's truly value that you're bringing them. So I think I'm lumping marketing automation into some of the social selling category, if you will. Sales professionals, especially the young ones, need to understand that sales truly is a process, and that there needs to be value brought to the prospect. With all of the changes that are happening and the beauty that the internet is bringing by giving customers information, to be a truly professional sales professional, you need to understand that process. You need to know how and when customers are buying. You need to understand why they will buy. You need to understand who's involved with the purchase. You need to understand how long it takes. You need to understand who controls the decisions. Challenger, CEB, now Gartner, and the Challenger customer recently said something like 6.4 people are involved in B2B or enterprise sales. So a lot of people, young people, believe that, I got this one guy on the phone, it's 50% along the way. So it's just kind of done us a disservice. On a positive note with social selling, I'll give you a personal example. I do a lot of blogging and a lot of LinkedIn communications, and we have people who are members who share our things. There's a guy I knew, very, very successful financial services company, hundreds of employees. Reached out to him 4 years to become a member of the Institute. And he just said timing wasn't right, and let's keep in touch. Kind of just moved him off of the prospect list, if you will. The guy called me last week and said, I'm ready. And I'm like, oh, that's great. So we met last week. He said, I'm ready to become a corporate member. He said, and here's the key. He said, I've been following your progress for the last 4 years. I've seen the consistency in your valuable communication, and you're letting us know what's going on. And now's the time for our company to participate in an organization such as the IES. So now we're ready to go. So the continuation of posting articles, of sharing articles. I share articles that our thought leaders have written all the time, not just on our blog, but LinkedIn and Twitter. Because if it's a valuable message, I want to get it out there. And I also want to help people who are helping us help sales professionals get better. So, it's we're going through this period right now where we're defining what works, what doesn't work. You still need to show value to the customer. You still need to be educated on the customer's process. And there's some more that we'll talk about in a little bit.
So you I've been taking copious notes as you've been talking, because there's some really key points here that you brought up. One, sales truly is a process. No matter whether there's social technologies, marketing automation technology, no matter what gets invented, at the end of the day, there's still a process. And what I always try and coach and teach sales professionals is, to you, it's a sales process, but to your buyer, it's a buying journey, right? It's a process they go through. You're in the profession of sales. You are a sales professional. They are not a professional buyer unless they're in they're in that role in purchasing or something like that in the larger companies, right? But the reality is they're in the business of technology, operations, marketing, whatever it may be, their niche, their department within their company and their industry. That's what they're specialists in. A need has caused them to have to buy something to support them in their role. So if you meet them where they're at and you help guide them through their buyer's journey, look at your sales process, turn it upside down and look at, okay, the steps they're going to go through to evaluate you, you're going to be in a much better position. So I truly agree with that. Sales truly is a process. The stats you talk about, 6.4 decision makers. I don't know if they have a really short decision maker in there or not, but that's the 0.4, right? But 6.4 if they're looking at averages in the B2B sales process. So yeah, you can't be singularly focused on one person. Hey, I got a live one here. Looks like they're interested. You still have to go through back to that sales process, right? Who's the decision maker? Who's the financial approver? Who's the technical evaluator? Who can influence it and say no, but can't say yes, right? There's still that overall, process you got to go through and do your homework and research to make sure you understand who else is involved in that decision. So that's absolutely key. And then when you go back and tie it all together with a bow on social selling, based on what you said, consistency of valuable communication. This is your example, your specific example, Fred, on what you've been doing. 4 years, whether you realize that or not, someone was going through a buyer journey. You were reaching out and keeping in touch. That consistency, being persistent in reaching out, but consistently doing that is key, right? But then ultimately, when they were ready to raise their hand and say, okay, I'm ready to buy, part of what influenced them is the fact that you demonstrated that professionalism, that what I call professional persistence, right? In demonstrating that value over a consistent period of time. If you just went dark and then stopped putting anything out there, then you won't really exist in their mind anymore for all those that need to kind of be nurtured along that process. So that kind of pulls all of that together. I'm impressed with that when it comes to social selling. You're looking at it not from a viewpoint of technologies, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, on down the line. You're looking at it as, hey, at its core, selling is still selling. You still have to understand a process. You have to get into the mind of your buyer, understand what's important to them, and add value, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the customer is in charge, and it's not going to change. The customer has so much access, to information. The customer probably knows more about what you're selling than you do. They're using the stuff every day, or something similar to it, or they know that they have the need. There's user groups on LinkedIn and all over the place. There's other types of evaluation, even Yelp now. People can, it's not just restaurants anymore. Are you a Yelp guy at all? Do you like Yelp?
Yeah, I use Yelp for restaurants or anything I'm going to go out and take a look, for the first time, especially if I'm going to go somewhere, like to see what other consumers have said about it and what their experiences are. Absolutely.
But everything is being reviewed on Yelp now. It's not just restaurants, or things like that. It's businesses, it's companies. It's, I live in DC, like I mentioned, and there's a Metro, which is the big subway system in DC. And one day I was just kind of playing on Yelp, and there are people who were evaluating the Metro stop. The West Falls Church Metro stop. This isn't great because there's no Starbucks nearby. I give it 1 star. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. But then I went back again, and there's like now 30 reviews.
Wow.
So the point is, the customer has plenty of information. They need you less and less. So if they need you less and less, back to your VP analogy, you truly have to be an expert on what you're bringing to market, but also, and this is one of the questions that you may ask later on, is you truly need to be an expert on their business so that you can go to them and truly provide value. That's one of the truly major shifts that we've seen. There's always a degree of that type of specialty, but more so now than ever, to get to the pinnacle level, to get to the highest level of the sales profession, you need to be a participant in that industry.
Yep.
And you need to truly bring solutions that the customer hasn't considered yet.
Absolutely. So if anything, social selling just made a very competitive B2B sales marketplace even more competitive, because what it's going to do is amplify who you really are, what your company really is. There's social proof out there and reviews, and you could put your referral sources out there or testimonials out there, right? So if you're good, it's going to amplify that. If you're not good and you're lacking, it's going to amplify that. So clean up your game, right? Because social selling is going to say everything of who you are before they even reach out to you, if you're lucky enough for them to reach out to you, right?
Yeah, and the last thing on social selling, which I think is really important as well, is one of the other common themes that come through at the IES programs is positioning yourself. How are you positioned in the marketplace? And you want to be positioned as an expert in providing service or support or products to an industry that you serve. So I don't mind the whole issue of people having separate Facebook personas, if you will. But, one of the reasons why this guy called me is because I'm not ashamed to let people know that we're tracking sales excellence. And I have some people who, from back in the day, who aren't in the sales profession, who think of sales as not being a profession, who, send me jokes every once in a while. But the people who know that I'm serious about this, about bringing value to their customers, people have recognized me as that. And people like you, who are proud that it's a profession and who treat it like a profession and let people know this is what I do. I am in the profession of helping customers in B2B selling get better at the art and science of selling. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and there's a lot in a name. I love your, the Institute for Excellence in Sales and your focus on excellence in sales. There was a very purpose-driven, specific reason why I named my company Sales Integrity. Back in 2004 is when I launched it, and obviously, LinkedIn wasn't a big thing. It was just getting off the ground and all that stuff. And so the social element, Facebook, same thing. You weren't really amplified out there through the social world. So it was really the old school, salespeople are bad, used car salespeople, you get the negative connotations. And I wanted to do something about that, right? And so I named my company Sales Integrity because I wanted to force the discussion. And just like you get people that chide you and send you jokes about the sales profession, all that stuff, I had that in mass in verbal discussions or emails or just out networking. Sales integrity, isn't that an oxymoron? I'm like, well, I'm glad you brought that up. And then that forced the discussion to where I would have had to go force it myself. But just by the sheer name of it, that told people what I was doing. It was a movement to really have people look at the sales industry as a profession, right, that you can have a career in. And nowadays, there's actually, I think, over 100 universities that have degrees you can get in sales, where back when I graduated and when you graduated, there was none, right? It was all marketing, and then sales, you happen to fall back on that if you couldn't find something. This is what people would joke about, right? Now people are purpose-driven, getting into the professional sales, and I love to see institutes like yours, universities that have those Sales Alliance Foundation and programs where people, these young professionals can get a degree in sales. I volunteered my time recently to be a judge for one of their sales competitions at the University of Texas at Dallas. And so it's really just great to see these young professionals. I mean, they're really good and being trained very well. So it's just great to see others that are part of that cause as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is just one last story here. I worked for a company called CompuWare in the late 90s, based out of Detroit. It was a $2 billion software company, but mostly it sold mainframe type software. But the culture was very, very sales driven. And I was a marketing director. So, but the one thing I remembered was Pete Carmanos, who was the founder of the company, just an absolutely wonderful CEO, he used to always say that the last person out the door before we turn off the lights for good is going to be a salesperson. Mm-hmm. So it is about sales.
Yeah,
it is about sales. My motto as a marketing consultant was marketing that doesn't lead to revenue reward is a huge waste of time. Mm-hmm. It is about sales.
Yep. All roads lead back to sales, right? So if social selling is all the rage these days, Fred, then its chief rival that is equally polarizing is the tactic of cold calling. So let me ask you, is cold calling dead? You get a lot of these, two different camps, social selling only or cold calling only. The social selling only say, hey, cold calling's dead. So in your eyes, and you have a lot of experience with a lot of different thought leaders that come through the Institute for Excellence in Sales, some of them are, and some of the names you had mentioned, Jeb Blount, he goes by Blount, I believe, and Mark Hunter, for instance, two guys I really respect that really focus on that niche of prospecting, lead generation, building sales pipeline. You get folks like that advocate, hey, you still have to pick up the phone. The phone is a critical element of what you were doing. Then you get others that are in the social selling only camp that say, hey, cold calling's dead. Don't worry about that. Just focus everything in LinkedIn, for instance, or LinkedIn and Facebook, for example. So I'd love to get your viewpoint on, is cold calling dead? And if not, what is your view on just using the phone in general as it relates to selling?
Yeah, so this is the most important sales tool on the planet still, having been in the room with over 100 sales thought leaders over the last couple of years. And here's the thing: we don't really call it cold calling; we call it prospecting.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, to go through the proverbial yellow pages. In some industries, some of our members who are in some certain financial services industries tell us that they do that. They just have their guys do 150, 200 phone calls a day, and they're extremely successful. The session that we're going to do on July 21st, we're bringing Kendra Lee. She's fantastic. She spoke for us 2 years ago. The topic is, do you hate cold calling?
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're going to have probably 170 people on July 21st in Washington, D.C. to attend a session on how to get better at it. And, there's two words that have come through almost every session of the over 100 programs that we've done over the last couple of years. The first is mindset. How do you build this mindset that you're truly bringing value to your customer? And if you're bringing value to your prospects, then why would they not want to engage in a conversation with you? The second word, this comes up all the time, is fear. Whatever your fear is, how do you get past the fear of picking up the phone? It goes back to the word willing that we used before as well. But, we send, it's fun. We send out 15,000 emails a month about our programs. And we have a nice 10% open rate with members, and people who come frequently, we have close to a 50 to 70% open rate. But I tell you, man, when I pick up the phone and call someone to come to one of our programs, it's 50% more successful.
Mm-hmm.
One quick tactic: sometimes people are afraid to call the phone because they don't want to sound like a salesperson, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we've learned from one of our sponsors, a guy named Steve Richard at a company called Foresight, is what they call the 3x3 approach. In under 3 minutes, find 3 things about your prospect that you can talk to them about, which eliminates the cold calling aspect. And if you're cold calling, you're only talking about yourself. But if you're truly prospecting, you're talking about something of value to the customer. Maybe a blog that they wrote about, maybe a tweet that they sent out about some industry news, maybe something on compliance that you found about. It should take you no more than 3 minutes. You should find 3 things, pick up the phone, dial, get through. And there's no shortage of information out there about when to call, how to get past the gatekeeper. Our friends at Foresight and Funnel Clarity, Tom Snyder, are absolutely fantastic at that. I'm sure you're absolutely fantastic about that as well. Jeb's book, Fanatical Prospecting, is unbelievable. Hunter's book, High Profit Prospecting, is amazing as well. But you know what? I think people would say there's cold calling doesn't work because it's this fear and they're not willing to do what's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, I send tons of emails. Sometimes they get responded to. Sometimes they don't. Mostly they don't.
Mm-hmm.
If someone knows me, they'll typically, reply. But when they pick up the phone and make that call, things happen so much faster.
Yeah. And that's because you're confident. You've done your research. You know your business. You're passionate about it. And what you just outlined was really, really key. I wrote an article and published it on LinkedIn earlier this year titled "How Cold Calling versus Social Selling is Like a Political Debate in Who is Right." Right. And that was my most viewed and commented and liked article that I had, because obviously you have two very polarizing topics there, and two people, just like politics, right? People are, they're in their camps, they entrench and they won't give up on their point of view. But the reality is, just like in politics, how are you defining certain issues? Right. And if you define cold calling as doing no research, picking up the phone, winging it, flying by the seat of your pants, and just calling random names that may or may not be your target market, ideal client prospect, then yeah, that cold calling, that type of cold calling is dead. Even the example of the financial services picking up the phone and calling the yellow pages, they know that individuals will have finances. So they're probably, the people want to save and invest more. So the likelihood of hitting on some targets there is pretty good. However, they still do their research, know their talk tracks, know what they're going to say, try and find commonalities, right? And so the key is, how do you define cold calling? That's that mindset thing you talked about, right? And so, if you define it as, okay, I'm calling someone, they don't know me, that's cold, but it's my job to do my research, warm it up. So I have that 3x3 example that you gave, where 3 things that are relevant. Mm-hmm. And therein lies the rub of social selling versus cold calling. It's social selling and cold calling or social selling and the use of the phone and the use of email, right? To try and hit them with different touch points, but demonstrate value through your communication. If I called you and you and I didn't know each other, Fred, and I said, hey, and you saw that I started posting your articles and liking them and putting my point of view around your articles saying, hey, here's a great thing. And let's say we didn't have this podcast set up. You didn't know me from Adam. And then I called you and said, hey, Fred, I've been doing a lot of research out there, and you might have noticed I've reposted a couple of your articles. That's because I really believe in what you're saying. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing to help institutes for excellence in sales. Not that there's tons of those out there, right? But if I had something that I came up with that was relevant to you and it was valuable, you'd probably give me a little bit of time on the phone, right, for us to have a conversation. And it's up to me to connect with you based on doing that research and not being lazy and just winging it and flying by the seat of my pants, right?
Yeah, but the other thing too is, I think, was it Josh Silverstone who connected you and I?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. So Josh is a smart, young sales professional in the DC region. Mm-hmm. I've met with him. He's attended a number of our programs. He said, you really need to meet this guy, Sean. And he made an introduction. So, that goes into it as well. Someone trusted who said to me, you need to talk to this guy. And then, we discovered each other. And obviously we have a lot of synergy. And again, thank you so much for allowing me to be on your podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's a lot of fun. But, and then, before we even got on the phone, we had that recommendation. We got information about each other. You obviously did some research on my blogs, which I really appreciate. We had things to talk about when we got on the phone, so it wasn't just, tell me about the Institute. You had done some research ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So, when you do the prospecting, you need to bring value.
Yeah.
People are busy, you can't just shove yourself through the door anymore.
Yeah.
You need to bring something of pertinence, and the ability to get something of pertinence. If you go on LinkedIn right now and let's say you want to get connected to me for the first time, we just met a couple of months ago. We probably have at least 200 people in common because of our industry. Mm-hmm. And I'll probably know a lot of the usual suspects, but there might be someone kind of obscure. Maybe you see someone from college. Mm-hmm. It's like, gee, I wonder how, Tom Johnson knows Sean. Mm-hmm. And if I'm smart, I'll then reach out to Tom and say, how do you know Sean? Well, we're a member of the same basketball league or something in Chicago. He's a real sharp sales instructor and trainer and consultant. You really need to meet him. And he's also a big Chicago Cubs fan or something like that. Yeah. So then all of a sudden, when I call you, I'm not cold calling you. Mm-hmm. I know something of pertinence. I have some inside information. You don't want to be creepy about it. You don't want to go to the guy's Facebook and say, "Oh, I see your 8-year-old daughter's doing ballet. That's pretty cool." No. Yeah.
That crosses the creepy borderline.
Yeah, but to know that you just wrote this great article with my good friend Mark Hunter or whatever. Yeah. All of a sudden, we're no longer cold. Yeah. We're now engaging in hopefully a value-driven conversation, and you can do that with your customers and prospects all day long. Which goes back to treat it as a profession, do the right steps, understand the tools that are available to you, and what the mission is of your customer.
Yeah. And what you're outlining there is unique connection points, right? Like if you think of going to the personal side, how you met your spouse, your significant other, your best friend and child, or whatever it may have been, friends from college, there was always some unique connection point. Like, how did you guys meet, right? Everybody always wants to know that story. How did you guys meet, right? So your job as a sales professional is to create a very unique initial connection point, right? And you could do that through careful research and just continuing to work smart and work hard through the process. And there's a lot of opportunity out there: social selling, use of the phone and email, strategic networking, and referrals, right? So there's 4 right there I'm currently writing a book called Prospecting on Purpose, and I call those the 4 cornerstones of lead generation success. And there's 4 right there that you'll never run out of, ideas and tactics to create that unique connection point, that unique initial connection point. So I really appreciate you walking through that process there and giving some specific examples, because I think that really illustrates it to our audience. So, all right, Fred, well, unfortunately, I'm really having fun here. I say unfortunately, we're nearing the end of our time today together. So that means one thing on the Sales Integrity Podcast: it's time for the sales cycle. Right. The sales cycle, which I prepped you on a little bit before this, it's not only a process that sales professionals go through, but it's also the name of our lightning round, where I ask questions in a rapid fire format and look for quick answers from our guests. Now, of course, I always get this question asked, can I just give one word answers? You can, but if it's not valuable to our audience, then they're not going to get as much out of it. So kind of balance being succinct with value-based answers, as we're talking a lot about value. So our audience can at least take some information and run with it based on learning from you. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, we know in sales, we're competitive, right? We're always competitive. So every guest I have, I time this lightning round. So there's only 7 questions. And there you go. Get ready here. And so the current record holder is a previous guest, Stu Schlackman. And Stu wrote the book, 4 People You Should Know. He's the president of the National Speakers Association here in North Texas. And he's a good friend as well. But he did it in 1 minute and 55 seconds. Okay. So I'm going to time this, and we're going to go through 7 questions. But are you ready for the sales cycle?
Let's do it.
All right. I'm going to start the clock right now. So question 1, name a specific technology or tool you use for identifying and researching target market prospects.
It's LinkedIn all day long, Premium or Sales Navigator.
Okay. Question 2, what is the best method to initially get the attention of and connect with your target market prospects?
Talk about them. So like I mentioned before with the 3x3, find something that they have done that you can then follow up on.
Great. Question number 3, what method do you use to consistently stay top of mind if your prospects aren't ready to buy just yet?
Like I mentioned before, every week I post at least 3 to 5 things on LinkedIn. I try to blog at least monthly. And we use Infusionsoft as our marketing automation software. I hate to use the word nurture or drip, but we continue every week. We send at least 15,000 emails out.
That's great. Question 4, what sales process methodology do you use to manage opportunities through the sales cycle?
So Sales Performance SPI, Sales Performance International, is one of our sponsors. So I've always been a big fan of their solution selling approach.
Great. Question 5, how do you define the concept of closing a sale?
Closing a sale is an ongoing relationship with the customer. It's basically getting to the point where the customer understands that you are truly bringing them value because you have communicated that value clearly, and now they're ready to become a partner or customer.
Question number 6, how do you know when it's time to close a sale for any given opportunity?
Well, you have to ask for the sale. You can't be afraid. You have to get past that. It's a mindset type of a thing. But you also have to be experienced, and you have to also know where the customer is and how do they buy and how do they get approval and who's involved. One of the first things you need to figure out is, who's truly a decision maker in this process.
Great. And last question, what is your best advice for sales professionals to improve their closing ratio?
You have to understand your customers' challenges. You have to bring customers value to your customers per their specific need, not just how are you going to help them with your tool or technology, but what does the customer need to achieve from a business perspective and how you can help them.
Great. All right. You just closed the deal. You finished the sales cycle. You ready for your time?
Yes.
2 minutes and 23 seconds.
Yeah, I started going long on the...
You were doing real good. I thought you were going to beat it early on, and then last... But you know what? You're probably still in the top 3 times, by the way. So okay. That's still pretty succinct, 2 minutes and 23 seconds, which is good compared to the rest of the guests that we've had. So I think you came the second closest to getting Stu. He was real succinct, and he did add a lot of value, which was good. It was impressive. But your answers were great as well. That's awesome. So I really appreciate you joining us here today. So let's wrap up the show with your number 1 piece of advice for complex technical B2B sellers.
Once again, like I mentioned in my last comment there on the speed round, you need to understand the challenges that your customer is going through, and not just how will your technology help, but you need to be conversant. They don't need you unless you're bringing them value. All the stuff that you see in the challenger sale and 57% down the road and all that stuff, it's so true. The customers know more about you than you know about yourself. Mm-hmm. So you need to come to them with value, which means you need to become more of a professional. You need to think, you need to discuss. You can't just wing it. You need to have a plan before you meet with your customer. And if you do that, then your integrity will rise, as will your professionalism, and your career will be much more successful in the 2000s.
Great. Fred, what's the best way that our audience, our listeners can find you, get a hold of you, if they want to follow up with you in the Institute for Excellence in Sales?
Well, LinkedIn's a great place. Fred Diamond, FredDiamond. Our Twitter handle is IESBD. We used to be known as the Institute for Excellence in Sales and Business Development, but it's IESBD. And our website is the letter I, the number 4, ESBD. So we're going to hopefully change that in the near future, but I4, the numeral 4, ESBD. And Sean, this has been a blast. You do a great job. I'm thrilled that we got a chance to meet, and I look forward to working with you, Richard, down the future.
Likewise. I appreciate you joining us today, and thank you to all the sales cheapers out there who took the time to listen to today's interview. I appreciate it and look forward to everyone applying some of the wisdom that Fred shared today in the real world of selling. And now, let's wrap up today's episode with a few quick reminders. Real quick, before we end today's episode, I wanted to just share a few quick reminders with you. No matter where you listen to the Sales Integrity Podcast, please subscribe to it. Just subscribe to the show so you get them automatically on a weekly basis. The more subscribers we have, the more we're found out there by other potential subscribers, so that greatly helps the show. We are now on Stitcher Radio, so in addition to Stitcher, we're on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. And no matter where you subscribe or listen to us, please provide a 5-star rating and a quick 1 to 2 sentence review. That also helps others find the podcast. So help us grow the show. That would be great. And also, we still have our free 7-day video email course out there. You can go to mastercomplexselling.com to subscribe to that. So again, mastercomplexselling.com. It's a free 7-day video email course titled 7 Steps to Master the Game of Complex Technical Selling. So that'll do it for today. Go out there in the sales world today. Help your customers buy what they want, what they need, and what benefits them. And most importantly, go out there and make it a great day.